Welcome to season 2 of Edible RX. Coming at you in a new year with some new equipment. I got a podcast mic and some headphones, so I'm finally doing things proper around here. I set a goal for myself to produce 52 podcast episodes in 52 weeks this year, and so far I'm a few weeks behind. I ended up getting sick a few weeks ago, and that really threw me off because my voice was nowhere near podcast ready. I was blowing my nose all the time. It wasn't possible. And then, with my work schedule and re-recording the videos inside my meal prep course, it's just been a lot, and I really have not found the time to record podcasts. But here I am today. I wanted to give you a quick update on my mold journey because I finally feel like I'm out from underneath that mess, and I wanted to share with you now that I'm feeling like my old self what worked best, so that if you too are struggling with mold toxicity, you can try some of these things with the guidance of your practitioner as well. And then I'm going to get into the topic of today's episode, which is what is inflammation and why should I care? But first, if you're new here, hi there. I'm Laura Rodriguez, holistic chef, autoimmune warrior, and creator of the Flare Free Academy. In 2015, I started cooking the same anti-inflammatory healing meals I was preparing for cancer patients at work for my family at home. And in 3 months, my eczema, my migraines, and my joint pain completely went away. Now, my healing journey wasn't a linear one. It had many twists and turns along the way, and diet wasn't the only thing that I changed. But through blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of trial and error, I learned that in order for me to stay well, I have to consistently use anti inflammatory diet and lifestyle as medicine. I don't think this information should be hidden. And I think there's power in hearing other people's stories so that you can know what's possible for you, so that you can have hope for your future, and so that you can have the motivation to heal from within. And, because healing is possible, you just have to have the right tools, guidance, support, and resources to make it happen. And that's what this podcast is all about. So let's get started, shall we? All right, so before we start, I do want to give a little disclaimer. I'm not a doctor, a nurse, a dietitian, or a nutritionist. Nothing that I mentioned in this podcast is a replacement for the proper professional medical advice of your doctor. Everything that I mentioned is purely my own experience and is not intended to treat, diagnose any condition. Please consult your physician before trying anything mentioned in this podcast. All right, so this summer, my husband found a ton of mold growing in the subfloor of our house. He worked hard to remove all of it. It took a couple months. And he also installed a dehumidifier and fans under the house so that we can have cross ventilation and also remove the cause of the mold, which was moisture buildup. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this will help prevent this large like mold infestation from happening again in the future. You can learn more about in my last episode of Edible RX, which I'll link in the show notes. But for the purpose of this episode, I wanted to just give a quick rundown on some of the things that I believe helped me the most go from being in constant pain on a daily basis. Like I was waking up with horrible foot pain. I could not put my feet flat on the ground in the morning, could not walk down the stairs. And by the end of the day, my husband was having to help me do ordinary tasks because my right foot was just in so much pain. And so I went from that to feeling like myself again. And unless I work like a super long day or something, which is really rare, having virtually no pain at all, which is exactly what I needed in my life because I was struggling there for a number of months and it was not pretty. So, number one, my husband removed the mold by spraying 30% undiluted hydrogen peroxide on everything. And he did it 3 times. The instructions said to spray it, and if it foamed up, to spray it again. But he found that certain areas would foam up even a second time. So he went back to those areas and sprayed them a third time. Then, once all of the physical spraying of the mold was done, we actually fogged the subfloor twice because there are certain things that he couldn't see or reach, certain crevices that mold may be lurking. And so the fog has tiny subparticles that can reach to those places that we can't even see or reach, right? So we fogged it after we physically sprayed everything. And then as far as me, so we removed the mold from the house. That was number one. Now, we did buy an extra fogger to do the inside of the house, but that is like super labor intensive. I didn't know this before I bought it. You have to fog everything and then you have to physically wipe every single surface. And I just have not brought myself to doing that. Now, I will say we did wash all of our clothes and anything else that we could wash. I still have some curtains to do and stuff, but we washed all of our clothes and like the sheets and everything, pillows in hot water with some of the hydrogen peroxide as well. We got just the regular standard stuff that's made for laundry so that it didn't bleach anything. So like kind of like color safe bleach. We washed all the clothes in that as well. And there are other products that we bought, but we found we really didn't have to use, but I just have them still on hand in case we find that we need to. That being said, if I ever have a long break from work and I have a ton of energy, I will reconsider fogging the inside of the house and wiping down all of the surfaces, or maybe hiring somebody to do it, because I do have that product and it's just sitting around. It's $1,000 worth of fogger that's just sitting there. So anyway, we have it in case we need it. I will say we have made a plan because during winter you cannot have the 24-hour dehumidifier hooked up under the house because it may freeze in the winter. So we do have a plan that in the spring, once the the possibility of freeze is over, we'll fog every year, and that's like $1,000 just to get. We already have the fogger, we paid for that, but you have to pay like $1,000 to get the product to put in the fogger, and so we figure $1,000 a year just for for yearly maintenance. Hopefully, as I said earlier, fingers crossed, will help us prevent us from having to like go through and spending the thousands of dollars we've had to do to reverse the mold growth that we found in the summer. So okay, so on to the things that I did to remove the mold from my body, which I believed helped the most. This is not a full complete list of everything that I tried, but I wasn't going to just bore you guys with all the possible things that you could do, and I figured I'd give you the things that I can tell physically actually really helped. And these are in order of what worked best. So, number one was daily hot and cold therapy. So, I bought an infrared sauna blanket last year. I was in that sauna blanket every single day for at least an hour. And then I would follow up with a cold plunge if that was in the pool or the shower. And that really helps to sweat out the mold and then flush it from your lymphatic system. In addition to that, I was taking daily binders, and because binders also bind to essential minerals in your body, I was replenishing with minerals. I think that was really important because if you're just taking binders and you're not replenishing, I don't think you're going to get the same result feeling better as quickly as I did, because being depleted in minerals can give you the same symptoms of having chronic inflammation, like joint pain and achiness and stiffness and stuff. So, definitely highly recommend if you try binders, which I think did a world of wonder for me, to make sure that you're taking minerals as well with that. Okay, and the next thing that I found really helped me was eating flare-free consistently. So when we found the mold, I was right in the middle of our 12-week live meal prep instruction for my meal prep course. And I went right after that into basically building the self-paced version of the course. So I've been meal prepping for a number of months. And I will say having those meals in the fridge at all times so that I can eat flare free consistently without having to like stress and do a lot of work has been absolutely paramount for my healing. I think if I was resorting to eating takeout or restaurant food or drive through or whatever because I was tired and didn't want to cook and didn't have energy to cook after being at work all day and then also just being in physical pain, it really wears you down. And so I think if I was resorting to eating anything other than flare free that entire time, I don't think I would have gotten better as fast as I did, 100%. So that's definitely up there. And then the last three things, they're kind of, I would say, equal, but because they were so much more expensive, I didn't do them as much, like the daily sauna and cold plunge, the binders and the minerals, and then just eating flare free. These last three things were more expensive, and so I didn't do them as frequently. And so that's why they're at the bottom of the list. But I would say they probably worked as well. And so if I had a little bit of extra money, I probably would have done them a little bit sooner. But I went to the doctor, got sublingual, I'm sorry, I went to the doctor and got glutathione pushes, which is like glutathione is the body's major master antioxidant, and so it helps, fight inflammation, right? That's what antioxidants do, and they help you remove toxins and stuff. And so I got that kind of like in an IV, basically. And then I also bought sublingual glutathione, which you put under your tongue, which tastes horrible, but I think it really worked because it was when I started, like at a certain point, when I was doing the sublingual glutathione daily, I was feeling really good. And so I think it really helped. Highly recommend. Again, it's expensive, it tastes like garbage, but I think it really works. And I have it in the fridge. I'll probably always keep it on hand. If it runs out, I'll just buy another one because I feel like if you're either like in a flare or you have some crazy exposure to something that you want to get out of your body, or you just feel kind of run down, or I feel like I'll just pull it out whenever I need to. And it's just a great thing to always have, kind of like in case of emergency. And the last, but certainly not least, was I was getting ELT. Some practitioners also call it ALT. So it's either electronic lymphatic therapy or assisted lymphatic therapy. And what it is basically like it's like 75 to 80% more effective than a manual lymphatic massage. And it's like these electromagnetic current like wands that they move over your lymphatic system physically on your body to move lymph and to drain lymph. And I think I had about four or five sessions from a place in Hermitage, Tennessee. So if you have specific questions about where I went and what I did, and maybe brand suggestions, you can DM me on Instagram at Chef Laura Rodriguez, and I'll be happy to send you those. But yeah, so I went to this place in Hermitage. I've been going since I would say about 3 or 4 years ago, since the last time I had a crazy toxic mold exposure. And in the beginning, they were like, "You are so inflamed." I was like, "I know, I'm in a lot of pain." And then by the end of it, I was shocked. She was like, before she was like, "Can you come back next week? Can you come back next week?" And then by the end of it, she's like, "Okay, I'll see you next month." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay." She doesn't need me to come back right away. So you could tell over time with the binders and the hot and cold therapy and the glutathione and the ELT, I was slowly but surely able to remove the mold from my body, so much so that she was even like, see you when I see you." So those are the things that worked the most for me. I'm feeling amazing right now. I feel like myself. I feel like the next step in this journey is to lose a little bit of weight because, the body will store toxins in your fat to protect your organs and stuff. And so I did gain weight from this last toxic mold exposure, and I think just the stress that it all causes as well. And so that's my next part of my journey. I've got the mold at least to physically where I'm not feeling the effects of it. I haven't gotten my test results back as far as like what else is in there. But if I could lose a little bit of weight, then I'll really start feeling like my old self again. So I'm really excited for that kind of like next leg of this journey. If you are struggling with mold toxicity or you feel like you might be, go ahead and listen to my last episode and then reach out to me on Instagram at Chef Laura Rodriguez if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to help you. I've been through this 3 times now. Plus, when I was a kid, I did live in a house that had mold, but I never knew about it. I never dealt with it. So this is more like there are 3 times in my life recently where, like, I know I lived in mold and I had to do something about it to get it out of my system. And so this is what worked for me. And I'm always, always, always happy to share because it's just not talked about enough. And I think mold is one of those things that we probably all come into contact with more often than we know. So, all right, let's talk about inflammation, the topic of today's podcast episode. So, there are 2 types of inflammation. I know I talk a lot about anti inflammatory food, and I feel like maybe I give inflammation a bad rap because I'm always like, eat anti inflammatory, fight inflammation through diet. But truth of the matter is there's 2 types of inflammation. There's good inflammation and there's bad inflammation, right? So good inflammation is called acute inflammation, and that's the body's natural response to injury and infection. For example, if you cut your finger, your skin will turn red, it'll swell up and it'll kind of warm up around that area where you cut your finger. That's your immune system doing what it needs to do to repair and protect that cut from infection, right? And that's exactly what acute inflammation is, aka good inflammation. It's the immune system's ability to identify and remove foreign stimuli. All right, so in essence, this is good, right? This is the type of inflammation that all of us need in order to be healthy, right? But there's also bad inflammation, which is called chronic inflammation. And that's a type of inflammation that we don't want. The type of inflammation that I personally work to fight every day, and the type of inflammation that all of my recipes were designed to help you fight every day. So, what happens essentially is that the same immune response that I talked about earlier with acute inflammation is happening inside of our bodies 24 hours a day for either months or years at a time. So, when you have chronic, prolonged, unmanaged inflammation like this, your body will eventually start producing pro inflammatory cytokines that can cause your immune system to attack itself. And that's how we get autoimmunity. So, for me, I have rheumatoid arthritis. So, essentially, the way that I understand it, and reminder, I'm not a doctor or a nurse. This is just what I've learned through my research from the top leading functional medical professionals from around the world. And I'll link my resources at the end of the in the show notes. So if you want to read more to learn more for yourself, or if you want to fact check me, you can. Um, but I basically learned that, if I go back time and look at my timeline of my health, right, I can trace all the way back to when I was 5 years old. I was given penicillin for an illness at the age of 5. That's how they found out I was allergic to penicillin, because I nearly died from it. And ever since then, that same year, I got asthma. I was hospitalized for an asthma attack. I was diagnosed with 21 different allergies, and my health just slowly deteriorated over time. I was the only one in my family that was constantly sick. I was always in and out of the doctor. When I got to college, I basically went from being this is interesting too. When I was a kid, I was very underweight. I think maybe because of everything that happened to me and my gut health being damaged by the antibiotics. Um, I think that I was not absorbing nutrients from my food because I was very thin growing up. And when I look back at pictures of myself, I'm like, I just look malnourished, to be honest. And then I went to college and I got so inflamed that I gained a bunch of weight, right? And I was like puffy and just inflamed. You look at pictures of me from certain points in college and it's just like, wow, you could just see the inflammation in my face, right? So I can trace back to like my own health, timeline, right? And basically what I've realized is that since I was 5, basically, I've been riddled with chronic systemic inflammation for so long that my immune system started to confuse my own joints as a foreign invader and thus started to attack those joints. And so, the way that I understand it is that your DNA can determine how inflammation presents itself in your body. So, whatever inflammation related condition that you end up will, to a certain degree, depend on your DNA, right? So, for some folks, inflammation presents itself in the brain, right? They may have Alzheimer's or anxiety or depression. For some folks, it presents itself in the thyroid. They may have Hashimoto's or hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism or whatnot. Um, so that's how the DNA portion comes into it. And I know that a lot of it also has to do with epigenetics, right? So, how our diet and our lifestyle and our environment can turn on those bad genes and activate illness, right? Which brings me to my next point. Autoimmunity is not the only chronic illness linked to chronic inflammation. Stroke, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, asthma, allergies, etc. All of these chronic conditions are actually related to chronic inflammation. And you'd be surprised by how many common things that we have to deal with on a daily basis can actually contribute to the onset of chronic, prolonged, unmanaged systemic inflammation. Things like eating the standard American diet, poor sleep hygiene, right? You're not getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep at night, or you're not getting 8 to 10 hours of uninterrupted sleep at night. You're waking up every single night at the same time and you can't fall back asleep. Chronic, prolonged, unmanaged stress, right? We have unmanaged stress and then like things that we can't control, we're always going to come into contact with. And then we have stress that we can lessen and we can lessen our exposure to, but we just don't because we're either trauma bonded to it or we just know any better or what have you, right? So say for example, like every day I have to get my daughter to school by 7:15 in the morning, right? That is a stressful period of my life. So I have to actively make sure that I am doing things to make my mornings less stressful, like preparing her lunch the night before, preparing breakfast on Sunday. So all we have to do is reheat our breakfast in the morning, making my daughter pick out her clothes the night before, etc. So that an ordinary, normally stressful thing in my life that happens every single day can be less stressful. And then there's reducing my exposure to unnecessary stresses. So, say, for example, back when I used to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, I got to a point where I was like, this is not this type of stress. The only thing I can't manage it. The only thing I can do is lessen it, right? So what I did was I chose to increase my rates so that I could work less and make the same amount of money. That was the only way that I could lessen the stress of work, right? And so there's unmanaged stress, and then there's exposure to unnecessary stresses. Both of those things can really wreak havoc on the immune system, on the gut, and cause chronic prolonged inflammation. Which brings me to my next thing. A poor gut microbiome, right? Or gut microbiome imbalance. So if you have an overgrowth of bad bacteria or not enough good bacteria, or you have leaky gut, all of these things can cause total body inflammation. A lot of the inflammation that we have in our body actually starts in our gut, right? Um, Something else that a lot of people struggle with that causes inflammation, I certainly struggle with it, is poor detoxing capabilities, right? So, if we are constantly bombarded with toxins, they're in our air, they're in our water, they're in our body products, in our cleaning products, they're in our food, and we're not able to detox those toxins properly, they can build up in our system and cause inflammation, right? Now, chronic inflammation is the most popular cause of death all around the world. In fact, according to an article from the National Library of Medicine from 2020, more than 50% of all deaths worldwide are attributed to chronic inflammatory diseases. More than 50% across the world. This is not just an American problem. I know this can be a bit grim and a bit morbid, but the good news is there's a lot that can be done to prevent, manage, or even reverse chronic inflammation, which I'm going to get into in the future in another episode. But I wanted to just share a couple, or not a couple, a few symptoms so that you can start to identify whether or not you may have chronic unmanaged systemic inflammation. So, first of all, according to my research, some people may test high for inflammatory markers but have no symptoms at all. So, if you have any of the things that I've mentioned already that can contribute to the onset of chronic inflammation, but you have zero symptoms, you may consider getting your CRP levels tested from a functional medical doctor. I recommend seeing a functional medical doctor that's trained in treating the root cause of your symptoms. And I have a full list of those on my website if you're looking for a new doctor. But by all means, do what you have to do. If you have to go to your ordinary doctor that's covered by your insurance, see if they'll do the test for you. Maybe even go the extra mile to take the test results and just have them read by a functional medical doctor. There are people out there that might be able to help you with that. And I have a full list of that on my website. I'll link that in the show notes as well. But many, if not most of us, who are suffering with chronic inflammation do experience the following common symptoms. And this is including but not limited to, okay? Chronic fatigue. So you're waking up tired, even if you got 8 to 10 hours of sleep. You can't get halfway through the day without having to have coffee. By the time you get home from work, you're absolutely exhausted. You don't have energy to cook and clean and put the kids to bed. You're on the couch until it's bedtime. Joint pain, right? It is not normal to have pain in your joints unless you hyperextend your knee and you need to ice it and you need to rest it. I'm talking about, like, we should not be having all day, every day when we wake up pains in our elbows, our wrists, our knees, our ankles, right? When I first started my healing journey, the whole reason why I actually found out that I had rheumatoid arthritis was because I could not lift the containers of food off the counter at work and put them into their cooler bags without debilitating pain in my elbows and wrists. And I knew that that was not normal. That's when I went to the doctor and I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. It is not normal to be in constant pain all the time. That's how I knew I had mold in the house, because I had pain in my foot, which is funny because it was in my right foot. And the last time I had mold, toxic mold exposure, I had pain in my left foot. And I was like, this is so weird. It's very difficult to stand on my foot when I wake up in the morning, right? And I even got diagnosed with plantar fasciitis and got like all the fancy shoes and everything that I needed for that. It never went away. I had the pain all day long, and it even intensified some days by the end of the night, right? So another common symptom of chronic inflammation that a lot of people experience is muscle aches, muscle weakness, stiffness, lack of mobility, right? If you struggle to walk, if it hurts to walk, that's a problem. Brain fog, anxiety, depression. So many people talk about mental health, but not enough people talk about how mental health is linked to physical health, and it's linked to gut health, and it's linked to diet, and it's completely preventable and treatable and manageable. Diarrhea and other chronic digestive issues, right? So if you're chronically constipated, if you're chronically bloated, if you're chronically gassy, Those can also be a sign of inflammation in the gut and inflammation in the body. Insulin resistance, lower back pain, frequent infections, frequent illness. So if you're always sick, you always have to get an antibiotic, you always have ear infections, right? That can be a sign of chronic inflammation. And then last but not least, and this is funny because it's both, it's like all of the above, right? Sudden or prolonged weight gain, and then also sudden or prolonged weight loss. And those are just some of the many symptoms, and there are many more. There's something like over 100 different inflammation related illnesses now. So, does any of that sound like you? Can you relate to anything I talked about? If so, stay tuned for next week's episode that will teach you how food can fight inflammation so that you can get some relief. And if you're ready to get started today, download my free 4 quick cooking, easy to execute anti inflammatory meal prep recipes that will help you stock your fridge with breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert for a family of 4 in 3 hours or less so that you can use food as medicine with ease throughout the week. DM me the word recipes on Instagram at Chef Laura Rodriguez for the link to download these recipes to get started today. All of the recipes are gluten, dairy, sugar, corn, soy, free, and anti-inflammatory. And I include vegan substitution suggestions in the meal prep packet as well. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Edible RX, the podcast that teaches autoimmune warriors to use anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle as medicine. I'm Laura Rodriguez, holistic chef, autoimmune warrior, and creator of the Flare Free Academy, signing off for today. Until next time, guys, eat your damn vegetables. Bye!